making you gay.
I know that my personal impression is not the kind of information you want. What you all want to know is what the maid's every move and performance was, right? Psyche's presence was overwhelming on Hibana as well. Of course, this was partly due to the position of my seat. She was 2 meters in front of me, and I could hear her voice the loudest acoustically. Misa and Akane's sounds were drowned out by the other members' sounds, so I rarely heard them clearly except for their solo parts. Visually, her stage performance was truly captivating and eye-catching. As she sang, she made eye contact throughout the audience, and if someone was raising their arms violently, she smiled and gave a finger gesture of thanks. Orenji, or at number 3 BAND-MAID fan, would have no doubt be under the illusion that she's in love with me. But even with that point aside, her spirit and the power of the singing itself were nothing short of tremendous. In this Hibana, the whole song, as well as the rest of the band's performance, seemed to be pulled and uplifted by her singing. For a moment, this band even almost gave the illusion of being her accompanying band. Nonetheless, the entire performance of this song, as far as I can remember, was an overwhelming, uplifting feeling. I think I was just cringing in the midst of the storm of loudness that seemed to be knocking against me. It was an overwhelming intensity that cannot be described by words such as passionate performance, but rather a fire-breathing heat. I actually owe you all an apology. Due to my serious factual errors in my last post, which would be part 19, I have decided to delete it in its entirety. This was due to my mismanagement of the video files, which led me to mistake a completely different video for the one recorded in BAND-MAID The Day of Maid OQG Live video, included in the limited first pressing of the said single. The Honkai, included in the Day of Maid OQG Live video, does not have the special intro I was pointing out. As soon as Hibana ended, Misa and Akane started playing alone, since it was obviously an intro to the next song. Oh, so this is it. As was discussed here, it had been reported on Twitter that Honkai and No God had new special intros at OQG up to that point. That intro was a cool one, with a tense exchange between Akane and Misa, but it did not last very long, and they went straight into the original introduction of Honkai. The structure of the intro was not so different from the one they had played as a special intro to another song at the OQGs in the past. As for the main part of the song, it seemed that I was influenced by Influencer here as well, because all the familiar and varied content of Honkai sounded more pop rock than ever before. Wow, I wonder if it was ever this pop rocky. With such a feeling of confusion, I surrendered myself to the change of tune with my head tilted back. By the way, I had one goal in mind when I did go home to OQG that day. I had read many comments on OQG's Twitter page that the Unseen World songs in particular were better live, and Honkai was especially amazing, etc. So I wanted to see what and how exactly was amazing. In general, many maniacs prefer live performances to studio recordings, which is not surprising in itself. But in the case of Honkai, for example, one of the things I was looking forward to was to find out exactly what shines through live in that complex and difficult piece. And as it turns out, I was too completely overwhelmed by the sheer power and persuasiveness of Honkai Live. One of the reasons for this, as I reportedly said, is the overwhelming power of Psyche, and the performances by the others were far more wild and compelling than the studio recording. Particularly impressive was the vividness of the breaks. In fact, I had never been overwhelmed by the break itself in Honkai before. However, I think it was the first verse. Suddenly, a a brilliant and breathtaking break appeared in a place that I had not been aware of before. This kind of brilliance can only be achieved when all players are in sync and fulfilling their roles with technically perfect timing. It would require not only skill, but also a great deal of practice, and also a complete sharing of the meaning of the momentary break and the feelings of all the members toward it. I was moved to the point of getting goosebumps when I thought about how amazing it was that all of this came together so perfectly in this live performance. I should also mention the contrast and dynamics that are an extension of that discussion, not just in Honkai, but in any part of any song. The contrasts that weave through the changes in the parts of the song are brilliantly vivid and staged, both sonically and colorfully. And then, the dynamics. For example, in this Honkai, just before the guitar solo, Saiki shouts 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, which serves as a bridge into the guitar solo. In this Okuji, this dynamics of the crescendo between 1 and 8 are much larger and more intense. Saiki, on the final 8, is almost a scream, and Konami takes advantage of the overwhelming power of Saiki's scream to play an exuberant solo in Mincho mode. And this power was then transferred to Misa's solo, and a solo relay with a tremendous amount of heat developed. These solos by Konami and Misa were one of my highlights of the day's many performances. I believe that this kind of performance is not possible by just one soloist alone, but only by the perfect coordination of the performances and feelings of all the other members who support him or her. I went home and re-listened to the studio version and the online version of Honkai, and my sense was that it was less crisp and had only about half the dynamics of the live performance I had just heard. Of course, if one were to compare the volume and coloration of the sounds technically, one might find little difference, or vice versa. I recognize that my impression is probably due to psychological and sensory influences. However, I also think that if this is an illusion, it is the real pleasure of live Okuji. By the way, when I was writing about Misa's solo part in Honkai, I suddenly remembered one important thing. It was a thought that came to my mind like a running light when I was listening to Misa's amazing solo in Influencer. This is a direct adaptation of Konami's solo pattern in Sense for Misa? The other day, I read a comment on Mircord from 08125150 about this part. I think the bass solo is in the track. It was like a call and response with Saiki. Bass solo, Saiki. Bass solo, Saiki. Guitar solo. Yes, I guess she was right. Perhaps I did not interpret it as a call and response at the time. However, if that part was the same as Konami's solo in Sense, Misa's bass solo, Saiki's one voice or one verse, I don't remember the length of this part or the content of the words at all, Misa's thrilling solo in the upper octave, then the thought that came into my mind at that time was, I can explain the feelings that came to my mind at that time. However, I did not remember Saiki's call before Konami's solo part, and thought that she had went straight into the guitar solo. After Honkai, the next song started without pause. It was Choose Me. The master in front of me in the front row leaned his upper body backward. Oh, this song hadn't played yet. I was also surprised. I had not expected to encounter this nostalgic piece in the tense third section, which was full of complicated and difficult pieces. To my own surprise, tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. Tears come in many colors. Tears of sorrow, tears of joy, tears of emotion, tears of parting, and so on. But how can I express my feelings at this time? For example, when I finally returned to my hometown after a long and arduous journey of personal growth, and I see my old best friend waiting for me on the station platform with a big smile on his or her face and his or her arms wide open, the tears that flow there will surely be colorless and transparent. Tears that transcend all emotion and come spontaneously from the core of your heart. After that, needless to say, I felt nothing but joy and gratitude for Psyche's song and Konami's ever passionate first solo. Then Konami's second solo. Again, tears welled up in my eyes. But this time, they were not colorless and transparent. They were the color of tears of farewell.